Good morning, everyone. Good morning to everyone here in the room in Paris at ESA's headquarters, but also now I'm looking at the screen, a very warm welcome and happy New Year 2023 to all those connected across Europe, actually, that are now looking at the screen. Before I will give the word to our ESA Director General, Josef Aschbacher, to open his annual Director General's press briefing today, I would also give a warm welcome to our ESA directors and representatives here in the room, and also Anna Rathsman, our ESA Council Chair, who's joining in, I guess, from Sweden right now. And with this, I would like to give the word to Josef Aschbacher. He will give a short introduction, a review of 2022, and more importantly, even an outlook on what will happen this year. And after that, we will go into a Q&A session with the journalists, both in the room as well as those that are connected online. Thank you very much. And with this, I hand over to Josef Aschbacher.
So thank you, Ninja, and good morning also from my side. Happy New Year to those of you whom I have not yet seen or spoken. Last year was a very busy year. I will show just a very few slides on where we stand, a short recap of last year and a view into what happens this year. But I really would like to spend time on the discussion on the Q&A part, so I will not have too many slides, just a few things to highlight a few points. So first of all, thank you to all the journalists for joining. You are an extremely important community to us, and I'm really keen on making sure that our interactions are good, open and transparent, and I'm very happy that we have this occasion, but we should have many more occasions over the year. In fact, I just asked over the weekend on the numbers of interactions we had, and we had more than 800 and something interviews and interactions with the journalists, with US expert journalists until October, and there have been obviously many more in November and December. So I'm really looking forward to a very intense interaction between us and between you and us. Next slide shows some of the highlights of what we had last year. There have been, of course, many more, but just a few pictures to remind everyone of what happened. You see in the middle the James Webb Space Telescope. As you know, we have launched it on the 25th of December in 2021. The instrument was switched off in the beginning of last year, and the first data were released in mid of last year in July. Of course, these images, one of them is shown here, have been stunning because they really look back into the origins of our universe to some few hundred millions, 300 to 400 millions after the Big Bang. And this is quite incredible and have fascinated not only space people, but really, I would say, the population at large, everywhere outside the main countries working in space, really into all parts of this world. You see below that the Gaia data release was also a major highlight last year, again mid of last year, where we look really at our Milky Way. Some people call it the Google of our Milky Way because we are monitoring about 1 billion galaxies, and this is quite impressive what the Gaia data release has been bringing. Then you see the Vega C maiden launch, inaugural flight, which was on the 13th of July. You see underneath Artemis and the Orion capsule with the European Service Module. This has been very widely reported and certainly a major highlight because it also underpins the strong cooperation between NASA and ESA, which is not only limited, by the way, to Artemis, but is one symbol of where we work extremely well together. You see also EL4, which is the launch pad of Ariane 6 here in Kourou, in the top bottom right corner. And you see the two astronauts, Matthias Maurer and Samantha Cristoforetti, who have been in space last year, one returning, Matthias in spring last year, and Samantha going there, shaking hands with Matthias in the space station and then coming back 6 months afterwards. Together, the two of them plus Thomas Pesquet the year before have been guaranteeing, ensuring an 18 months continued presence in the space station, which is really quite impressive. Next one shows or recalls another big success which we had last year. I think the slide is still loading, which is the ministerial conference of 2022. Can we? Yes, which of course you have been reporting very intensely about. Don't need to recall some of the key figures, but just to say that the subscription which the member states have been providing is really quite phenomenal. You have to consider this in the circumstances in which the ministerial took place, economically, but also with the war on European territory, with the inflation. And I have to say that this is quite remarkable, and I'd like to offer really my big gratitude and thanks to the member states for moving Europe one level up through the strong subscriptions they have done in the program. This is quite fascinating and is quite a strong signal of Europe's engagement in space. This increase of budget, which is about 17% compared to the year before, as you know, is for the optional programs, which is about 80% of the budget in 2022 economic conditions. That means the inflation comes on top, so the increase is actually more in monetary terms, but of course you have to consider the inflation as part of it. This increase will add about 10 to 20,000 new jobs to the existing jobs in Europe. We have done some first estimates. The studies are still ongoing, but these are very first numbers. And this is quite remarkable because that's what we want to achieve also, apart, of course, from developing very exciting space programs, but also in terms of economic activity, employment. These figures are quite important ones to consider as well. Of course, we have launched, or we have agreed at the ministerial on a number of new projects and missions, just to mention a few, but you have reported on them. ExoMars, as you know, we have found a very strong way forward with some small help of NASA, but mainly a European mission. Argonaut, our logistics transporter to the moon, transporting about 1.5 tons of mass to the moon. To be ready at the end of this decade. Moonlight for navigation, communication activities around the moon. LEO PNT for new complementary generation in navigation. Genesis also navigation. And in Earth observation, we have quite a number of new satellites and missions that we will initiate. ILS-2, Truth, Harmony, Scout missions, and the next generations of Sentinel-1 and Sentinel-3 topography. So you see a very strong portfolio of new missions, in addition, of course, to continue some of the existing programs that we have initiated already earlier in 2019 in particular. Next slide shows where are we in the implementation of Agenda 2025. Of course, you all know very well the 5 priorities that have been highlighted. I have been rereading it myself after the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, and was thinking whether the agenda is still up to date or it needs updating. And I can tell you that it is more up to date than ever before. It's more valid than ever before because the priorities identified in 2021 are actually extremely important, and as I said, even more today than maybe a year ago. Strong ESA-EU relations, of course, a top priority to organize ourselves well in Europe. I really should say, and I want to say, that the cooperation with the European Union is going well. Of course, there's daily discussions on a number of topics. This is clear. But overall, it really is a very strong, a very solid relationship we have. I'm very grateful to the colleagues in the European Commission and the European Union for having this strong cooperation. But this is, as you perfectly know, one of my personal priorities to make sure that Europe works well together in a complementary fashion, because the European Commission's and the ESA's capabilities are complementary together with USPA, of course, but this is certainly extremely important. Also, what helped is internally in ESA, I have created a new directorate of ELI, as it is called, and this reinforces and strengthens our interfaces with Brussels quite significantly. We also had an extremely successful Space Summit last year, the first ever, and this year we will have the second Space Summit planned in November this year. Then on commercialization, again, I've created a new directorate called Commercialization, Industry and Procurement. The commercialization part has been extremely fast and accelerating its activities. You see here some of the highlights we have done. I think worth mentioning is that 19 agreements were signed with an investor network, venture capital funding entities, the EIB, EIF, and several others. But there's much more than that. We have organized a huge amount of activities over the last year to really move forward on commercialization. I don't need to explain how important it is, but this is certainly a top priority in order to make sure that ESA is well adjusted to the challenges of the commercialization aspects which we have in front of us. Safety and security. Security, we have actually launched new activities, secure connectivity, obviously, which is the third flagship initiated by the European Union and under the lead of the European Commission. But also on our side, we have organized funding, put money on the table in order to make this happen and support the European Union in the implementation of this flagship program. We also have strengthened cybersecurity significantly within ESA and initiated a new activity called civil security from space, which is small, but still significant in terms of its activity. No need to explain the reasoning that we have a very tense situation in Europe from a security perspective, and therefore, of course, also we contribute within the means we have. And safety, which is more dealing with our safe orbits. We have installed a new space safety center last year in ESOC, and this is working extremely well, looking at space weather, planetary defense, debris mitigation, debris removal, and similar activities. Then program challenges, and I will say a couple of words afterwards on some of those that are on the table, in particular launches, but not the only ones. That's certainly something that requires a huge effort this year. And last but not least, ESA transformation. Again, I will say a few more words on some of the details, what we are planning to do this year. Next slide. Gives just a recap of the budget that we have this year, 7.08 billion. It's about the same amount of budget as last year. You may say that the 17% increase of the ministerial subscription should result in a higher budget. Yes, it will, but not in the first year, because at the beginning, as you know, in most programs, the pickup of funding is relatively small. And of course, this budget will increase in the years to come when satellites are being developed or other activities are being done. This is the breakdown into individual categories. I'm not going in detail. You will get the handouts and you can look into those numbers a bit more in detail. As you see here, the largest program is Earth observation, as it has been for quite a number of years, about 25% of the funding. Other big ones, navigation, certainly human spaceflight, microgravity and exploration. They have got a significant increase of the budgets, or the subscriptions, I should say, at the ministerial last November. And also here, the activities will certainly increase as well. Plus, of course, you see all the others, launcher programs, technology, scale up, basic activities, science program, extremely important as well, as you see them listed on this table here. Next slide. Again, on budget, shows the budget income side. You see that 4.9 billion are from member states and associated states to ESA. I'm not going into the numbers in detail. I see the bigger countries, the medium-sized and smaller countries, but I think it is really quite impressive how strong the commitments of all the member states is. On the bottom right, you see the breakdown between ESA member state or member state incomes, not only ESA member states, but also associates and cooperating state like Canada, which makes 66% of the overall budget, so 2/3. 1/4 comes from the European Union, and the other 10%, roughly a bit less than 10% from EUMETSAT and other incomes. Other incomes are third-party agreements, the big one, of course, being the agreement with Italy, but also some other agreements which we have in place in terms of overall breakdown. Next slide. Some of the key milestones coming up this year. Of course, the astronaut selection, which happened, was on the same moment as the ministerial conference, as you know, has brought 17 new astronauts, 5 career and 12 other reserve astronauts, including one who is a para-astronaut. Then we have the launch of JUICE coming up in April. We have the launch of Euclid coming up over summer. Andreas Mogensen will launch to the space station in the August timeframe. We have a space summit, as I mentioned, planned towards the end of the year in Seville in November. And the Ariane 6 inaugural flight is being prepared. And I will say a word afterwards also on the situation on our launches. So these are just a couple of the highlights. There are many more activities going on, as you can imagine. They are not all on the slide here. For example, important that the first image of MTG will come out in the March timeframe. The launch was in December and is now being commissioned. The instruments are being tested and verified, but the first data, this is under the control of EUMETSAT, for whom we have prepared and developed this satellite, and who will lead on the release of this image. Also, let me mention that the cooperation with EUMETSAT is going extremely well, and the MTG launch, of course, has signified this as one example. Next slide shows our astronauts. You have seen this picture. I'm not commenting in detail, just to say that the career astronauts will start to be employed in ESA in April. The 3rd of April is a Monday, so that's when they move to the European Astronaut Center in Cologne and become full ESA staff members. Mentioned Andreas Mogensen will be launching to the space station in August, and the other reserve astronauts and also John McFall, the para-astronaut, we will engage them through the smaller contracts, but they will keep their jobs where they are, but certainly we will interact with them. They will be ambassadors, and we will prepare them and work with them for possible future activities. As you know, they are in the reserve pool and therefore to be prepared whenever opportunities come up. The next slide. Jews, there was just a few days ago a very important media event in Toulouse where you could see the satellite before it is being shipped to Kourou. Extremely exciting mission. It's really a very strong, a very important mission, top mission for Europe, both from a science point of view, but also industrially. I have to say the instrumentation on JUICE is quite complex, about 10 different instruments on board, measuring various parameters of the moons, of the icy moons of Jupiter, Ganymede, Callisto, and Europa. The launch is currently targeted for the 14th of April, but as always with launch dates, there may be some variations coming, but this is our target date. Certainly a highlight for this year from many points of view, or many aspects, because the exploration of these icy moons is just so fascinating, and from a science perspective, and what this mission will bring will be really to better understand the outer solar system of Jupiter itself, but in particular these three icy moons. What they are, and as you know, they have an ice cover which is quite thick, several tens of kilometers, 100 kilometers thick, both Ganymede and Europa in particular. Underneath there are huge lakes, again tens to hundreds of kilometer thickness, much deeper than the oceans of our planet Earth. And underneath in Ganymede we have a rocky surface. In Europa we expect again an ice core, but all this is not 100% verified and clear. And this JUICE mission in fact shall really explore how these moons are composed in order to see whether they have potential for habitability. And just to be very clear, we are not looking for life particular. We are not monitoring fish or big fish or creatures in these lakes, but we are seeing how these moons are composed and whether they could be habitable or not, depending on the parameters and the measurements we are taking there. Of course, this will be extremely important information that might possibly lead to other future missions to the icy moons, which are extremely interesting from a science point of view. Next slide shows another very exciting mission on again on space science, which is Euclid. Euclid is quite different from JUICE. It looks at dark matter and dark energy. The launch is planned in the July to September timeframe. At the moment, we are targeting for a launch very early in this window, in very early July, and will be from Cape Canaveral on the Falcon 9 mission. As you have also heard from the news last year, that this is one of those missions where we use a non-European launcher. But coming back to the science, this is really fascinating. As you know, about 5% of our universe is the one that we can monitor in the visible light and which we can grasp. The other 95% are supposed to be dark matter and dark energy. And this is what Euclid wants to really explore, to see what are the secrets of dark matter, which we believe are responsible for the formation of structure in the universe. That means the creation of galaxies, planets, stars, and dark energy, which drives the accelerating expansion of our universe. Both phenomena, dark matter and dark energy, are not well understood yet, and we really need to better study them. And the Euclid mission, we hope, is really providing quite a good insight in this. We are expecting to monitor about 1 billion galaxies over 10 billion of years, which will be a unique data set. There are more than 2,000 international scientists involved in the science aspects of Euclid. You see also here there are some media events which we are planning. 21st of February in Cannes, Toulouse, in Cannes, TAS, to show you the satellite before it is being shipped again to the launch site. The next one, Earth observation. Climate change, of course, remains a top priority for everyone in the world and also for ESA. We have a number of activities that are ongoing and are being planned. I mentioned MTG already. Also Copernicus, Sentinel-1C and EarthCare, both of them are being prepared for launch. The nominal launcher is Vega C, and I will say a word in a minute about the launch situation, but they are getting ready for launch. EarthCare, of course, as you know, is a mission together with JAXA. We had quite a few issues to solve over the last years. I'm glad to say that they have been addressed successfully, and now we are heading towards launch. Sentinel-1C, as you know, it will replace Sentinel-1B, which failed in orbit about a year ago. There's also a number of other activities, obviously, in Earth observation, many of them focusing really on monitoring our climate, but also providing daily information for many disciplines from agriculture, forestry, ship routing, disaster management, also security, which are obviously providing data and information from our Earth observation data, both the Earth Explorers, the Copernicus missions, and from the EUMETSAT side, of course, meteorological missions. Next one, space transportation. And this is something that, let me just be very clear with you, is one of the biggest challenges which we have in Europe today. We have two more Ariane 5 launches coming up, as you know, one planned in April, one in June, and this will be the last Ariane 5 launches. Vega C on the 20th of December had a failure, and this is a problem. We have immediately installed an independent inquiry commission. They are working right now. I expect the results of this committee to come out or to be ready by mid-February, second half of February. And of course, depending on what the inquiry commission will find in terms of root cause and recommendations in order to proceed, we will proceed accordingly. But this is something that is certainly a top priority for us in ESA and for Europe, to make sure that Vega C gets back to flight as quick as possible, but under the right conditions. We had three failures in 2019. Since 2019, thank you, Daniel. This is something that, of course, is a very deep, which requires a deep analysis also on some of the quality aspects, and we will look into this very seriously. Ariane 6 inaugural flight. We are at the final stretch of getting Ariane 6 ready. I can say that we had a very successful hot firing test in Lambertshausen on Friday last week. More than 900 seconds of firing, including the APU, which is extremely important milestone. We have another hot firing test planned in spring, and of course the other milestones are getting the ground segment ready, getting the combined tests organized in Kourou, and resolving some of the last remaining technical issues on Ariane 6 itself, to prepare ourselves for a launch as soon as possible. As you know, the launch date, which has been communicated in October last year, was before the end of this year. We will look into this. I do not have any new date or any more precise date, but certainly we are aiming, we are trying to advance as quick as possible. If you ask me when do we launch, I cannot give you now a precise answer, but certainly something that is a top priority for us, because it's clear that with Ariane 6 we need to re-establish European access to space. Of course, what also happened last year, and you know very well, is that Soyuz was halted from Kourou. That means that as of mid this year, we do not have guaranteed access to space for Europe by European launchers. And this is a huge problem for us, for all of us, for me personally, for ESA altogether, for Europe altogether. And we need to really work on this to get back to guarantee access to space for Europe again. There are several measures we take. I mentioned Vega C and Ariane 6 to make sure that we put everything on the management side on track to proceed and advance as quick as we can. We will also support micro launchers or small launchers, mini launchers as they may be called, which are in the making in Europe in several countries. Half a dozen, as you know, are preparing for their inaugural flights. I have asked my director for space transportation to look into ways how we can launch a competition to really launch ESA payloads with these micro and mini launchers even before they fly, at least engage them in the launcher contract, and then of course make sure that they can fly safely on some of these mini launchers. As you know, with some of them we have engaged already. They have been supported through our Boost program, for example, and certainly something that I would like to see coming and reinforced in Europe. Of course, they are in the lower segment, probably below 1 ton of payload, but certainly a very important one which is developing here. Another effort we take is on reusability. Prometheus and Themis are being further developed. We had just opened a space port in Kiruna in Sweden just recently, and we are preparing for the first hop test of Themis from Kiruna, which probably will happen early next year. But an extremely important aspect, because this goes into reusability, and liquid propulsion, which of course is the future in launches. Space Rider, we will do top tests this year on a small scale model and on a full scale model, and last but not least, on Kourou, we will really make a huge effort to decarbonize the energy supply and invest significantly in providing more photovoltaic energy supply to really produce about 130 tons of green hydrogen, also to reduce greenhouse gases, and we would like to go towards a 90% renewable energy supply by 2025 in Kourou. Next slide, and this is the last slide, which is the ESA transformation. Of course, we have been transforming since quite some time, as you perfectly know, but this year will really be a peak year in transforming ESA. What does that mean? I would like to make ESA really fit for the future. That may sound like a nice slogan, but it's really extremely important that we are becoming leaner, faster, more agile, and more responsive to better respond to the challenges of space which we have around us. Commercialization, of course, is a huge element that drives this transformation, but not only. For example, one activity I already initiated, and which will be put in place this year, is time to contract, which will be reduced by 50%, which is quite significant, that our procurements will accelerate by a factor of 2. But also time to hire. We will hire about 400 new colleagues this year, and I've asked my director in charge of human resources to really find ways of how we can speed up the hiring process, and I've got proposals to speed up by 35%. That means not half, but 35%. Again, putting in some measures and actions within the house in order to make this possible. So you see there are 2 examples on how we want to really speed up and make ESA much more agile. But I will do this in a much more systematic way, also with the help of an external consultancy company, to really look deep into ESA's processes, into ESA's procedures, and make sure that, of course, where where reasonable, we will reduce some of this so-called red tape as we do. There are two criteria which are extremely important, which we cannot compromise. One is quality of output, and the other one is accountability vis-a-vis our member states and our stakeholders. This will always be, of course, the target, the benchmarks which need to be kept high. But within this, we have a lot of room, or we have some room for improvements, which we will really go into. And this may also lead to a small structural adjustments of ESA in terms of organigram, but this is all work in progress. Certainly, talent management and attracting young talents is also a top priority. They have quite different expectations working in a big organization like ESA, and I need to make sure that we attract them from many perspectives. It's not only sustainability and the way how we work, but there are many aspects that are linked to it, but certainly something that is very important for me, because I really would like to offer good opportunities and attract good people also to work within ESA and to work within space in Europe. And last but not least, also transparency of ESA, communication with you, journalists and colleagues in the media. This is a top priority for me. We can improve, I perfectly realize that, and we will put some effort in making this possible. I will organize a meeting in about a month's time with you. You will be invited, and we will see what are your requirements on us, how we can improve our channels, how we can be more transparent, because ESA is really doing so many good things, probably more today than before. And I really would like to make sure that you well understand what we do and how we work in order for you to communicate. And let me really take this moment as an opportunity to thank you, because you have been writing and communicating about ESA's activities in a very intense way, very successfully, and you contribute to the success of space in Europe. Let me say it as it is, and we need you, just to be very blunt. I hope you need us, and I really would like to make sure that this is working extremely well. So any suggestions from your side are more than welcome in order to make sure that communication goes out, because we have a lot to show. And that's my last slide. Thank you very much, and I'm really looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much. That was Josef Aschbacher, ESA Director General. Apologies, I'm sometimes looking at the screen, and that's because we are in this new world of hybrid events where so many people are connected online as well, and I'm looking at the incoming questions we're getting. But I would like to start with giving the word to those in the room. If there are any questions you would like to address, and for those that are connected online, I would like to raise your awareness that this is an environment where you can today unmute yourself and turn the microphone on yourself. So if you wish to do so, you're able to. So are there any questions? I would also like to mention that at 10 o'clock, there will be possibilities for one-on-one interviews following this press briefing. But if there's anything you would like to address already now, our Director General is available. Peter.
Yes. Three very quick ones. First, Joseph, on the budget allocation for 2023, you mentioned that a portion of the €1 billion or so in Italian programming is under management by ESA is for this year. What percentage is that? What approximate volume of funds is that on the Italian project? Second, on Vega, maybe for Daniel, if the initial indications of the Vega failure are correct, and it was a second stage problem, and the Vega C second stage does not look anything like the Vega second stage, is there any thought given to proceeding with Vega launches while waiting for Vega C to return the fight? And then a last one on launches as well. Joseph, I think you said that ESA is now considering whether to change its policy of requiring at least one successful launch before you engage with a launch service provider. Maybe you could explain that a bit.
Okay, thank you, Peter. First one, Italy. I might look for the support of Jean-Max. What the exact figure is, how much of this share is the Italian contribution, Jean-Max? Okay, he's checking. So while we're answering the other questions, we will get the exact number.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning. First of all, it's 1,070 million for the IRIDE component for the years 22, 26, mid-26. So you can see the percentage, and on top of that, there's the launcher part. So this year, of course, it's more because the contracts have to be signed until March 23. So we're actually on the IRIDE side aiming at trying to sign all contracts, so engaging most of the money in 23. But the total amount for the part on Earth observation for the constellation is 1,070 million.
Just to complement, it's roughly 300 million on space transportation overall, and as Simonetta said, we have to commit it this year. So that's a key aspect. May I just continue on Vega, which was the second question? So Peter, yes, you're perfectly right that first, let me say that the first stage, the P120C, worked nominally, and I think this is of utmost importance also for Ariane 6. Second, yes, the issue happened on the second stage, which is the Zefiro 40, which is a new stage on Vega C. The engine ignition went nominal, and then we had an under pressure, which was noticed and which left at the end after firing to the mission loss as a fact. And now to the question about Vega, because de facto, even if it's a new stage, we have a similar supply chain. So we really look end to end into the aspects. But it is correct that, of course, waiting for the final findings from the Commission, we'll do everything to first bring Vega C safely back to flight and then insist on a robust exploitation. And I really insist on this dimension. And this, of course, will also impact Vega, because we will also look of what does it mean for Vega flights. But it could be an opportunity to fly Vega before Vega C, yes.
And maybe on the last point, Peter, at some point you're right that we have said that before using a micro launcher, we want to see one successful flight. I would like to already before we see this successful flight now to make contracts with micro launchers or mini launchers. Of course, there will be caveats that we need to be reassured that we put our payload safely on those launchers, but I would like to give them this commitment now before their maiden flight for two reasons. First of all, to really accelerate the development on their side, but also to give them reassurance that they have a customer, an anchor customer who is ready to fly with them. Of course, always assuming that their inaugural flights will be successful and we are satisfied from a technical point of view. But this is a change of policy, you're right, and you have noticed as well.
So the contractual commitment would occur before their first flight, but the actual flight of the ESA payload would not occur until after their first flight.
Correct, because the ones that we are talking about have already booked their first flights, their first launches with other payloads. So yes, you're right. The free spot for an ESA launch will not be the first one because their first ones are already booked in the ones we know.
Thank you very much. That was Peter de Selding from Space Intel Report. We have two questions from Guillermo from Spain, one on the Space Summit that is taking place in Spain at the end of this year, and the other one on Ariane 6. Guillermo, I'm not sure if you can unmute yourself, and if you want to speak yourself, feel free to do so and raise the questions yourself. Guillermo? Sorry, he says. I will read your question. So the first one indeed is related to what are the expectations for November's Sevilla Space Summit and how Spain is facing the national and European space industry needs.
Okay, what are the expectations? We are actually just starting to plan the Space Summit. That means the agenda, the various topics that are being discussed with the European Commission and with the two chairs. One would be Spain, the other one is Germany. I had a first meeting with Germany just a few weeks ago. We will have a joint meeting, Germany and Spain, coming up in a couple of days. So it's a bit early now to really give you the agenda, but the expectation certainly is that a number of topics will be addressed. Some of them are more of relevance to ESA, which will be certainly the ones that are also addressed in an ESA council, which typically takes place the day before. These ones are Progress on the accelerators, to start with the one on green future. I should have said maybe that this year also we would really like to engage on the accelerators that have been agreed in Matosinhos on the last Space Summit. And certainly the second Space Summit will report on the progress there, but also on the Inspirator on human and robotic exploration. We have a group ongoing which consists of non-space experts that are reflecting on the various aspects, economic, geopolitical, societal aspects of human and robotic exploration for Europe. This report is coming out in about a month's time. And then, of course, we will see what the report says, my reflections with the member states on what they take from it. But certainly this is one of the topics earmarked as well for the Space Summit. There are certainly other elements as well. ESA, European Union evolution. I'd like to further stabilize our really good working relationship, make sure that this is well, I would say, on track. Certainly on the side of the Commission, there I would expect secure connectivity, where we are supporting them, is another topic, but this is certainly left more to the European Commission to comment on that part. Thank you.
Thank you, Josef Aschbacher. The second question is related to Ariane 6 and when we think we can announce a specific launch date.
Yes, I will hand over to Daniel in a minute, but we are at the moment, as I said before, going through some very critical technical issues that we are going through, and one of them is the optopyro, which, for those of you who are a bit familiar with it, we are doing the hot firing tests. I have to say the one of last Friday was a huge relief to many of us because we've been waiting for this for quite some time. As you know, the previous test was interrupted. So now we really conducted this test last Friday. It lasted more than 900 seconds with the APU fully nominally tested. So this is really very positive. Daniel may give a comment on the first reactions to that. But we still have hot firing tests to do, combined tests, making sure the ground segment is ready, plus getting the launcher basically ready for shipment to Kourou. But I hand over to Daniel.
Yes, thank you. There are 3 milestones to get through before you can really fix the final date. First, it is the hot firing test now mentioned by Josef a couple of times. Let me just underline that the 2 boosts of the APU, the auxiliary power unit, last Friday for first 975 seconds and second 533 seconds allowed us to fully test in nominal conditions the new upper stage. So this is an important milestone, and the next hot firing test we're going to do are then going to simulate degraded cases. These are equally important tests before you can go to flight, but it was a big milestone which was taken last week. So this, we need to go through the full sequence of hot firing tests. Milestone number 1. Milestone number 2, we need to go through the full sequence of the combined tests, where you have the launcher in French Guiana connected with the ground. We are in the process of doing the electrical test of connection of the launcher with the ground. Second, in March will come the Friedrich connections. And then afterwards, we will have firing tests of the Vulcan 2.1, a short firing test planned in May, and then a long firing test of 500 seconds, which is very long, in early June. This is the second milestone to go through. And the third milestone, of course, is that we need the delivery of the flight hardware for flight model 1 in French Guiana before we can start the inaugural flight campaign, which we plan currently for the second semester. So I think these important milestones need to go through. All this is accompanied by the launch system review, which of course has to be done successfully. So we will progress, and we will debrief you after each key critical milestones we have ahead of us during the year. But I think before mid of the year, it is difficult to come with an exact date, but we are de-risking with each milestone we went through.
Thank you very much. That was Dani Neuenschlander, Director of Space Transportations at ESA. I see there is a question from Jonathan Amis, BBC, on the future of EO, of observation following the Ministerial Council. Jonathan, do you want to raise the question yourself?
Yes, thank you, Nina. Thank you, Joseph. I'm going to re-ask the question I asked at the Ministerial because I think it was a little bit too early for Simonetta, and that is but what are the implications for the 370 million euro shortfall on future EO? I'm concerned about Harmony, obviously, and how you're going to progress that, but also the future Gravity mission 2, the joint endeavor with NASA on another Gravity mission. So I'm wondering if Simonetta's had any opportunity to speak to member states yet about how she moves forward.
Thank you, Jonathan, for the question. As you say, right after the ministerial was too early. Since then, there have been iteration with member states. There was a workshop organized on the 12th of December, an informal one, to get feedback on priorities and strategic discussion with member states of how to tackle the undersubscription of future EO. There was a further discussion with the science community through ACEO in January, and there was a workshop last Friday, so just the 20th of January, with member states to prepare for PBO, where formally the consultation document will be tabled. This is going to happen mid of February. So the feedback we got from member states was to really maintain and preserve the core of what future EO is in terms of preserving the missions, the science mission, their value, and also the opportunity mission, which means we've got somehow very strong indication and feedback to preserve Harmony, go ahead with that mission as E10. So that's the plan currently, to also pursue the Gravity mission and the collaboration with the US on NGGM Magic, and that's also the plan currently, and also to preserve the Scout, because the block 2 of future EO, and here I'm going a little bit technical, is what is considered by member states to be the essential of that program. So what we have done in the meantime with the senior management of the directorate, we have tabled the proposal that we discussed last Friday with member states, which implies how we can still preserve these missions, which are the core of future EO, but without the current budget, or with the current budget loss, which means, for example, for Harmony, we go ahead full speed. We plan to go to IPC in May, but offload the cost associated to the launcher to the next ministerial. For Gravity mission, we have reduced the scope of the budget to try and do a number of, I would say, industrial setup, which correspond to a collaboration, but reduces the scope of what is spent until next ministerial 25. So basically, the exercise that's been done is to preserve the core and the essential of the missions, Harmony and Gravity in particular, but also the Scout, which is the core elements of future EO, and delaying some of the budget requests to the next ministerial, and also descoping or canceling some lines inside future EO. Make you an example, we looked at regional initiatives, and those are probably going to be either totally descoped or postponed. So we have either canceled some things, FISA 3 has been put to the next ministerial, either really reduced or delayed, but still preserving the essential of that program.
Thank you very much, Simonetta Kelly, Director of Earth Observation at ESA. I see we have an incoming question from Dimitri from the Interfax News Agency. The question is twofold. Dimitri, do you want to ask the question yourself?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, very well. Welcome.
Thank you. So my question is, does ESA have a plan to return, maybe exchange the equipment that had been removed from Luna 25, 26, and 27 spacecrafts back to Europe? And also, is there a plan to return or exchange parts of Russian Soyuz rockets and Kazachok lander that are stored in European facilities back to Russia? And have you discussed this matter with your Russian colleagues? Thank you.
Thank you. I will hand over to my colleagues, both to Daniel and David for both aspects. But just to say that on the Soyuz exchange, as you call it, this is certainly a matter between the governments of France and Russia to address first and foremost. And on Luna, I'd like to ask David to give us the latest update. Thank you.
Thank you and good morning. This is David Parker, Director of Human and Robotic Exploration. So concerning the cooperation on Luna, the only piece of equipment delivered from Europe to Russia was for Luna 25, the so-called Pilot D camera, which is a small demonstration camera for navigation and landing on the moon. That was removed from the Luna 25 lander and its return to Europe is being planned. There are no other equipments associated with Luna that were delivered, the Luna cooperation that were delivered to Russia. Concerning the ExoMars cooperation and the Kazachok lander, which it remains in Turin, integrated with the European elements of the descent module. Yes, there have been working level discussions with Russia and with Roscosmos. A proposal or plan has been put to Roscosmos, and we wait a decision on implementing that to allow the disassembly of the Russian elements with Russian workers, and they were awaiting a decision from the Russian party.
Thank you.
Just to complement the question about the remaining Soyuz launchers, which are currently at CSG. So there are two aspects in this debate, because on the one side, there are 2.5 Soyuzes still currently in the Ensemble de Lancement Soyuz in French Guiana. But let's not forget that the other way around, there are also OneWeb satellites currently in Baikonur. And there are exchanges on this. We are well coordinated between the French government, ESA, and in the case of Soyuz, of course, also Arianespace to contact, and there are written exchanges with the Russian authorities on that, but driven and channeled through the French government. What is then an issue for ESA is once these launchers have left the ELS, the ground segment of Soyuz is property of 6 ESA participating states. And the question will then be, how are we going to reuse this infrastructure? And this is a debate we're going to have with our member states. There are different options in thinking, either to reconvert it as a new pad for mini launchers or to use it as a storage area at CSG.
Thank you, Daniel. We just got in the meantime the answer to the question of Peter on the Italian share which is being spent this year through the agreement with Italy. Jean-Max.
Yes, thank you, Joseph. Good morning to all of you. Jean-Max Puech, Director of Veterinary Services. So regarding the Italian PNRR, the budget of this year will be roughly 180 million euros. To be more precise, 66.3 for launch activities and 110.4 for Earth observation activities, meaning a total of 176.7.
Thank you very much. In addition to what we have previously discussed on Soyuz, there's an additional question from Futura Sciences, Daniel. Daniel, I don't know if this has partially already answered your questions and if you want to add on to the subject. Can you hear us? Futura Sciences, Daniel? I can read your question. The question is addressed actually to OneWeb satellites. Do you have any information about a supposed exchange of OneWeb satellites stacked in Baikonur with Soyuz components stacked at CSG? When would it occur? And are there any plans of future use of Soyuz launch ensemble in Guyana?
I think for the Soyuz part, the question was answered on OneWeb. I've also read basically what is just mentioned, but we have no further information. I'm looking also at my director of TIA and navigation. No further updates on that part, apart from what probably you have seen also in the media.
In addition, and now I'm looking at David Parker again, in addition, we have several questions on Artemis, upcoming Artemis missions from Marie as well as from Enspal. I don't know if you want to unmute your microphone and raise them yourself. Upcoming Artemis missions. Could you say more regarding ESA's latest schedule for Artemis lunar activities? Are European astronaut seat allocations progressing with NASA? And will these involve Artemis 3, 4, and 5 flights? And the other one, similar also in regards to the seats and the possibilities of a European walking on the moon during Artemis 3, 4, and 5. A follow-up to what you have said in the previous press conference, if there are any news.
Thank you very much for the question. I'm not sure there's much new to say since Christmas. As I think I've said before, we have the expectation of ESA astronauts flying on Artemis 4 and Artemis 5. We have 3 seats agreed for Orion flights on Artemis. So the third flight, the third allocation, and which flight that is a subject still of discussion. I think it will be resolved within the next year, let's say. But our focus right now is on preparing for Artemis 2. The ESM2 has been powered up and the integration is continuing. And this year we have to deliver ESM3, the third one for Artemis 3. Concerning what we like to call boots on the moon, European boots on the moon, it's clearly absolutely aspiration. We are a very major partner in Artemis program as a whole now, and with the start of the Argonaut program, where we intend that some or all of the missions, some of the missions will contribute towards Artemis by providing cargo. We will continue our discussions with NASA, and I very much hope that we will have a ESA astronaut on the moon by the end of this decade.
Maybe just to add what David was saying, as you may have noticed, right after the ministerial, actually 1 week afterwards, I was traveling to the US to really debrief Bill Nelson, the administrator of NASA, and some other colleagues in the US about the outcome of the ministerial. Of course, we have many programs and projects where we work together extremely successfully, but I think one important aspect is really one objective of that mission was to give full and good visibility to NASA on our member states' commitments to these joint cooperations. And one element of that discussion, of course, is European astronauts and European boots on the moon, where, as David was just saying, this is a discussion that is still work in progress.
See, there's one final question coming in online. And of course, if there are questions in the room, feel free to address them. But I guess some of you will also wait for the interview opportunities later on. There's one question in regards to China and ESA's relations with China, in particular in regards to the Chinese space station. Is ESA still, or is ESA ever considered sending astronauts to the Chinese space station? If we could give a status update.
Well, thank you for the question. We are very busy supporting and ensuring our commitments and activities on the International Space Station, where we have a number of international partners working together. For the moment, we have neither the budgetary nor the political, I would say, green light or intention to engage in the second space station. That means participating on the Chinese space station. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then I see you have raised your hand there at the back of the room for a question.
Good morning, Thierry Dubois with Aviation Week. Last week, CNES President, CNES Chairman CEO Philippe Baptiste said that he would like the European launcher industry be organized in a more straightforward, a simpler way. Do you think that's feasible in the years to come? And if so, how?
Thank you. There's a lot of discussion on launches, as you can imagine. This will be a very important aspect, really, and you will certainly follow it very closely also throughout the year. Let me just recall that the 3 ministers of France, Germany, and Italy signed a very important statement, a joint statement, just on the day of the ministerial. This is a very good basis, at least for those 3 countries, together with us, to work on aspects of launches. Of course, I've mentioned quite a few things what we need to do this year, but it's also clear that apart from getting Vega C, Ariane 6 onto the launch pad and engaging with micro launchers, we have to think about the future of how we engage in launches in the future. And this, for me, is now the moment to reflect on it. We are call it as what it is. It is a crisis in launches in terms of independent access to space for Europe. And this is, for me, the moment where we have to reflect well with all the stakeholders involved. And these are obviously the the 3 member states I just mentioned, but also the other member states who are engaged in ESA's launcher programs, and industry, not to forget, because industry is playing an extremely important role. It is clear to me that the future, apart from the technical aspects, which are certainly pointing towards reusability, liquid propulsion, and similar activities, but also institutionally will need some changes. I do not have the solution today. This is certainly something I'm ready to address and to discuss with the various stakeholders. Maybe just one side remark. I've read in several news articles that G-return is the key to solve all the problems. It's one thing that we will address, very clear. But let me also be crystal clear that G-return is not the reason for the delays on Ariane 6. Ariane 6 has technical issues to go through, particularly handled through the ones responsible for the launcher, the ground segment, and ourselves. But also, if we talk about G-return, this is more the exploitation of it in terms of the cost, or what the cost of a launch is in terms of competitivity. And yes, this is something we look into. There is actually something that maybe not everyone is fully aware of, but today's arrangements already allow to change some of the contractual setups in terms of G-return once the initial investments of that country has been returned to an industry of that country, and afterwards the prime contractor is free to choose others if on a competitive process as deemed necessary. So this mechanism exists already today, but I think it's fair to say, yes, we have to revisit the whole approach a bit deeper, but this really needs the key players around the table, which will happen in the next weeks and months. Thank you.
Yes, please.
Yes, can you remind us how much the budget is for launcher for this new period of time?
Maybe, Daniel, you have the figure in your top of your head.
So the question is if you speak about the budget 2023 or what we have ahead of us. But you know that at the ministerial, we got additional subscription for a value of 2.851 billion to be precise, which with the ongoing programs puts us in a comfortable situation to really now have this evolution, which DG just mentioned, while going, of course, to the completion of Ariane 6, and by the way, also Vega C, to restore this capabilities, this independent access to space. And we will have to reorient eventually some money to achieve these short-term objectives, but we will not ask for additional budgets. Thank you.
Just for me to understand, you have almost 2.8, okay, almost 3 billion for the 3 years to come to spend in Ariane 6 and Vega C.
On top of what we have already in the running programs. That's correct. So if you want to have the detail, we have out of this 2.85 billions, we have roughly half of it dedicated to Ariane and Vega, and the remaining part is spread between the preparation of the future. And I think this is an excellent news that we have a significant amount to prepare the future in an ambitious way, and of course also the CSG, which is the remaining big part. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm looking at the time because we're already a bit over time. So I think we have maybe 2 minutes for one last question in the room, and I know you've been waiting. And then I would close the press briefing and we can continue with the interviews here on site. And for those that have a few remaining questions in the chat, we will of course address them with you by email.
Yes, Frederic Castel, good morning for Radio Canada and RTBF. Just to come back to the point of geo-return, Mr. DG, do you think that really it's not an obstacle to, in times of crisis, this policy, or would you encourage some changes in the future because of the very harsh competition and the crisis? The crisis is immediate.
No, this is something that, of course, we reflect a lot, you can imagine. But it's, as I say, there is harsh competition. And yes, In the future, and this is really future, that means beyond Ariane 6, because Ariane 6 is basically at the end of its development cycle. We will certainly look very clearly on how the launcher development in the future will look like. More likely, but this is all to be discussed with the key stakeholders. We will change approach compared to today, probably more focusing on developing major building blocks, which are allowing and supporting reusability, as we have mentioned before, and giving industry an even stronger role than was done in 2014 at the decisions to build up Ariane 6. Because I think we have gone not the full way in giving industry the full responsibility of leading these developments. We have probably gone halfway, a bit further, and I think now is the time to really reflect how we can go all the way in giving industry a much stronger leadership role. Of course, with us being an anchor customer, but also developing real building blocks to make sure that industry on a competitive basis can develop. But this is a bit too early to now to really put out all the elements on the table. I think this is an element of discussion, as you can imagine, with the various key stakeholders. But believe me, this is a reflection which we very deeply conduct in-house and with some of these people. And this is certainly something that now is the time to address and to really look deeper into it. And yes, as a consequence, I would expect some of the aspects related to G return may also find a modification depending all on the result of this discussion, or at least for the launcher sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And this brings us to the end of this press briefing. Of course, we can follow up with any questions you might have. You can, as usual, send them to media@esa.int. And I want to thank all the directors for being here, for all the journalists in the room, and of course, to all those connected across Europe. And a warm thank you to our Director General, Josef Aschbacher. Thank you.